Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all here and also to welcome visitors who may be watching this telecast live across Western Canada or perhaps in relay over the next few days. It's quite interesting that we do have quite a wide outreach for this lecture series, which is really a tribute to the quality of the speakers that we have. It's really a very great pleasure to welcome Dave White to join us today, and there's lots of interesting aspects about his visit. Last week he was having sushi in Japan with Maureen Reed. This week they're together in Saskatchewan. Dave comes to us as the current director of the National Science Foundation's Decision Center for Desert City, based at Arizona State University. And another connection, of course, that he's the second director, and the founding director is sitting in the audience, Pat Gober. So the Decision Center for Desert City is particularly interesting for us. Our Global Institute for Water Security aims to be interdisciplinary and even transdisciplinary, but there's quite a preponderance of activity on the physical side and engineering, although we're really keen to see a strong social science program. Actually, Dave's center is the other way around, so something like 90% social scientists and 10% natural scientists. So we're really interested to learn from him about the functioning of the center and some of the exciting work that they're doing, which is really focusing on decision-making under uncertainty in the water area, with a particular emphasis on problems of Arizona, and that, of course, links to management of Colorado River system more generally. So for those of you in SENS, you might be interested to know that Dave has actually got the title of Senior Sustainability Scientist, triple S, at the Global Institute for Sustainability at ASU, and also he's a member of a consortium for science policy and outcomes. So his research is really at the interface of science and policy. He's done a lot of work with a whole range of stakeholders and particularly policymakers. And one of the interesting features of DCDC is its decision theatre, which provides quite a unique forum for actually interacting with numerical models of water systems and exploring water futures. Dave is a very well-known scientist in this area. He's a recipient of an ASU medal for social embeddedness. I'm not quite sure what that means, but sounds interesting. And in 2014, he was awarded the Celebrating Natural Resources Award from the University of Idaho. His PhD is actually in forestry from Virginia Tech. So it really is a great pleasure to have you with us, Dave, and the floor is yours.
Well, I want to begin by thanking everyone from the Global Institute, the Global Institute for Water Security, and from the School of Environment and Sustainability here for welcoming me, and I'm very happy to be here. I want to say thank you to everyone who's live streaming this event, most importantly my mom and dad who are watching from Pennsylvania. And I'm really pleased to be here to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing at Decision Center for Desert City at ASU, and I look forward to an engaging conversation. If you have questions, I think we're going to leave some time, plenty of time at the end. But if there's something that comes up during the talk and you want a point of clarification or something, please feel free to interrupt and ask me then. Let me just start by elaborating a little bit on what Howard said about ASU and about the institution and the organizations that I am a part of at ASU, because I think there's a lot of complementarity and a lot of similarity between some of the things that are going on here and what we're doing at ASU. First of all, Howard mentioned I'm part of the Global Institute of Sustainability at ASU, and this is a horizontal organization that's designed to bring scientists and scholars from all over the university together to focus on sustainability problems and most importantly, solutions. So there are more than 300 different faculty members who are affiliated with the Global Institute of Sustainability from across a whole range of disciplines, from the natural, biological, physical sciences, engineering, but also the full range of social scientists and even the humanities and arts. And this institute has been a very successful catalyst for proposal development, for joint projects, for research that really blurs the boundaries and creates an opportunity and a space for collaboration, for knowledge production within the university that takes the best from disciplinary knowledge, integrates that into an interdisciplinary focus, and then combines that with deep and meaningful stakeholder engagement and knowledge production within practitioner, indigenous, and other communities to create something new and different, a transdisciplinary kind of knowledge. And this is something that I think the Global Institute for Water Security is similar in its sense of trying to bring together these different perspectives and create this catalyst for excitement and energy and innovation within the university. ASU, for those of you who don't know the institution, is a dynamic, exciting, and quite large place. We're the largest university in the United States. It's over 82,000 students at ASU. We have 4 campuses within the Phoenix metropolitan area, the Tempe campus being the largest, and it is a very exciting and dynamic environment in which to work, especially over the last 12 years or so. Under the leadership of our president, Michael Crow, I've had the great fortune in my career to arrive at the university at the same time that this transformational leader arrived at ASU. And not only is he an entrepreneurial and innovative leader, but lucky for me and my colleagues, he just so happens to focus on the impact of science on society and sustainability. And these are his 2 major, his own areas of academic interest. And so it's fortunate when your interests align with the interests of the leadership and the university, because he's done a lot to kind of create a space for this type of work to be done at ASU. So it's a fantastic place to work, and I'll start by describing a little bit about DCDC, or Decision Center for Desert City. So as Howard mentioned, we're funded by the National Science Foundation. We were first funded in 2004 under a program called Decision Making Under Uncertainty. And the premise of that program, which is a social and economic sciences directorate program, the premise of that program was, while there are important strides to be made in addressing physical and other science processes related with environmental change issues like climate change, there has been far too little emphasis placed on enhancing our capacity to actually make decisions under the conditions of uncertainty. Too much focus on trying to reduce that uncertainty, and not enough focus on enhancing our capacity to make decisions in the face of that uncertainty. And our focus has been on water sustainability, particularly in the desert Southwest. So Central Arizona, Phoenix, the state of Arizona, within the context of the Colorado River Basin, and then also urban climate adaptation. So looking at cities, particularly rapidly growing cities in arid environments, and understanding the intersections between issues like water supply and water security, food security, energy systems. So we're really trying to take a systemic look at water and its connections to other aspects. I want to point out, if you go to our website here at dcdc.asu.edu, you can download this synthesis summary report. So this report was produced to try to integrate all of the scientific knowledge and findings over the first 10 years of the center. So this was just published in 2013. It's about a 40-page document, and it does the best that we can to kind of bring all of this together under some thematic areas. So it gives a great overview of all the work at the center. And of course, I should note that this work is done by a fantastic collection of about 24 faculty members from around the university. And then, as you all know, the postdocs, grad students, and undergrads are the ones that really drive the engine, right? These are the students that really, produce the work through their theses, dissertations, and undergraduate projects. And so, for instance, you can see our fantastic group in the lower left-hand corner of this picture, the group at the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, where we bring the full group of graduate students every year and put on a special poster symposium on decision-making under uncertainty. So if anyone's at AAAS this coming year, you can look for us there. So what I'd like to do before I talk about the specific topic for today is to just give you some of the highlights. What are the big sort of contributions of the center over the last 10 years? And the first area that I'd like to focus on has been the contribution to new social science knowledge, new methods, and new techniques for understanding how individuals and institutions make decisions under a range of uncertainties, under climatic uncertainty, societal, economic, and other uncertainties. And we've advanced a variety of decision-making under uncertainty principles, particularly in water resources. And this is where Pat Gober's work has been at the forefront. Through a series of papers and presentations, Pat has developed an argument about how decision-making under uncertainty principles can be applied within the realm of water resources management. We've also made contributions in the area of anticipatory governance within particularly climate adaptation. And so this is the collection of activities focused on governing resources with an understanding of not necessarily predicting the future, but anticipating the future. And it's a nuanced but important distinction. How do we think about the future in ways that allow us to envision a variety of different possible outcomes and develop solutions that are robust against a range of those outcomes? And think about what are critical tipping points, transition points, and feedbacks, cross-scale dynamics, how those things might play out, and then use decision-making exercises to try to develop a suite of options that can be employed in an adaptive way over time. We've also done work within the area of scenario planning and in socio-hydrology, and I'll focus on those two areas in my specific talk today. Another area where we've made contributions within the decision-making under uncertainty literature focuses on the social processes underlying the production of scientific knowledge, and things like simulation models, decision support systems, scenarios, maps. What are the products of scientific knowledge, and what are the social processes that go on both within the scientific community and within and between the scientific community and other communities of interest, like practitioners, Native American communities, First Nations, etc. So, for instance, a couple of my own studies have looked at using framing theory from sociology and social psychology to understand how decision makers frame or understand issues like uncertainty when they evaluate the use of models as decision support systems. One of the interesting findings from this study that was published just this year, this is in the journal, the 2014 Journal of Environmental Planning and Management. In this journal, we found that decision makers used both scientific framing, meaning thinking about probability, right? Thinking about quantification of uncertainty, when they were evaluating the utility of models for decision making, but they also used political framings of uncertainty, as in they thought about what are the consequences of being wrong, right? So in a scientific framing, you may say that knowledge is certain when I have a confidence interval of 95%, right? When I can certify this information. But in a political framing, you might say, do I believe it? Do I believe it by a preponderance of the evidence? What are the costs of being wrong if I make a decision based on this evidence? That's a very political understanding of uncertainty, and decision makers tend to employ both of these approaches when evaluating scientific research results. We also applied framing theory to understand how modelers make assumptions, choices, and decisions when building models. Sometimes you might think of these things as non-controversial or not even understand that you're making decisions when creating these decision support tools. We looked at modelers and understood them as social actors with independent agency. And we found, for instance, that our own modelers, when developing the water simulation model that we have employed at DCDC, used a particular understanding, a particular framing of the idea of water sustainability. Specifically, essentially a water balance model, a conceptual model of water balance. That sustainability meant a supply sustainability. And those kinds of assumptions and conceptual understandings of sustainability were in essence embedded, hard-coded into the model that we developed. And there are other conceptual understandings of sustainability, thinking about things like social equity, right? About intergenerational justice, that were not included into the initial modeling. Not because they were explicitly excluded, but because they just weren't part of the initial framing and understanding of the modeling process. Another area that we focused on is this idea of knowledge co-production, or the cooperative production of knowledge. Along with colleagues from the Harvard School of Government, we've developed a series of criteria to evaluate scientific knowledge that's utilized for policy processes. Very simple. We say that scientific knowledge and models and other tools developed for decision making should meet and try to maximize 3 different criteria. They should be credible, right? Essentially valid, reliable. They should meet the scientific standards for being the best available science. But they should also be salient, meaning relevant to decision makers' needs. And finally, they should be legitimate, in that they should be respectful of the diverse array of stakeholder perspectives. And so our goal is to try and enhance the salience, credibility, and legitimacy of the different knowledge products that we produce. And we found in studying these knowledge production processes that, for instance, you can enhance these criteria like credibility and legitimacy as researchers listen to the individual concerns of the various different actors and make collective decisions about those processes. This is in a study by a colleague, Bethany Cutts, who looked at the production of participatory GIS maps. In another study led by my colleague Amber Woodich, we evaluated different methods for eliciting sensitive information from public resource managers. So we tested individual response feedback like survey questionnaires and open-ended comments, and we asked decision makers the exact same questions in open-ended comments and then in facilitated group focus group settings. And then we did a matched pair comparisons of the answers that we got in these 2 different techniques for getting information. And we found that private or confidential opinions can be important. It can be important to allow the stakeholders to express those in private, as the sharing of some of these controversial viewpoints can be inhibited by the public settings. There were advantages to both group settings and individual settings for eliciting information on very sensitive topics from decision makers and other stakeholders. We've also found through a variety of research techniques, including social network analysis, that these knowledge exchange networks, these networks for creating and exchanging and knowledge and making action and decision, can be built and enhanced through a variety of very specific techniques. Things like relevant research results, facilitated meetings and science policy collaborative workshops. We use undergraduate internships, where we place undergraduate students with partner agencies and give them both an academic supervisor and an agency supervisor, and require those students to live in that boundary space between the science and policy. And then they come to me and they say, my academic advisor wants one thing and my agency manager wants another thing. And we say, yeah, exactly, right? This is your experience for the semester, right? Negotiate that, deal with it, facilitate a conversation between those 2 people. That's the training that we're trying to give them. And then using models, scenarios, visualizations, and other kinds of graphical outputs can help to create these and enhance these social networks. And we've actually demonstrated empirically through social network analysis that we can improve the use of scientific knowledge utilization for decision making with these tools. So I want to change gears a little bit. That's some of the background, and I want to kind of set the stage for the specific study that I'm going to talk about today. And I want to make this hopefully non-controversial assertion that the coupled effects of climate change and population dynamics are widely considered to be among the greatest sustainability challenges facing humanity in the Anthropocene. There are a variety of different impacts that are going to occur and that are occurring now to hydro ecosystems that are the result of both climate change impacts and land use, land cover, land change impacts, and the interaction of these things with population dynamics and human decision-making in institutions. And understanding these complex systems and producing complex solutions for the complex problems is the greatest scientific challenge of our age. In the face of such challenges, we argue that we need now not only incremental solutions, but transformational solutions. The time has passed for incremental solutions to these problems. We must now focus on transformational solutions that radically alter the systems of social, ecological, and technological activities within our communities. And these transformational solutions require both scientific knowledge, but also an awareness and an integration with other concerns from policy and decision-making communities. So when I'm talking about transformational solutions, I'm talking about solutions that adjust by perhaps an order of magnitude a particular sustainability indicator. So taking groundwater overdraft that has been on a 50-year trend of regional aquifer decline and reversing that trend. Not slowing the trend, not slowing the curve, but reversing the trend of groundwater overdraft in your regional aquifer. That's a transformational solution. And a transformational solution within the policy system may involve a radical overhaul of the legal, economic, and political framework for managing water resources in the world. These are the kinds of solutions that we're advocating. The question that we're addressing in our research broadly is, given these environmental, societal uncertainties, right? These uncertainties, some of which are irreducible, some of which are endemic, given these uncertainties, how can cities, and in my case I'm focused on cities within the Colorado River Basin in the southwestern United States, how can these cities develop transformational solutions to develop and implement water sustainability transitions? And by transitions, we mean a goal-directed movement from one state to another state, right? From an unsustainable state to a sustainable state within these cities within the Colorado River Basin. So how can we achieve this transformational water sustainability transition? Well, let me set the stage a little bit with some of the challenges that we face. This is the Colorado River Basin, which is the geographic area for the focus of our study. You can see here, now in the center we have Phoenix, Arizona, in the center of the state of Arizona. The Colorado River Basin is the most heavily regulated and appropriated river basin in the world. It's divided into two basins, the upper and lower basin. The upper basin and the lower basin both have allocations for 7.5 million acre-feet of water per year, right, on a 10-year running average from the basin. We also have 1.5 million acres that are allocated to the nation of Mexico. So that's a 16.5 million acre allocation. That allocation decision was made during one of the wettest periods in the observable record. So we decided how much water we were going to appropriate during perhaps the single wettest 100-year period of the last 1,000 years. Our median flows are running at much more like 14 million acre-feet. So even on the median basis, we're significantly over-appropriated. And now you add the fact that we're facing historic drought. We're in the 14th year of drought in the southwestern United States. You may have seen stories about California facing massive water restrictions. We're in the 14th year of a sustained drought. Climate change impacts are materializing. We have a large number of promises to urban areas outside of the basin, so large inter-basin transfers to areas like Los Angeles and Denver. Meanwhile, the upper basin is growing dramatically in terms of population. Places like Las Vegas, that were never intended to be large consumers of this water supply, are now booming. This basin provides drinking water, or part of the drinking water supply, for more than 40 million people. It provides thousands of megawatts of electrical generating capacity, and the area along the Colorado River between Arizona and California produces 95% of all leafy green vegetables consumed during the November to March period in the United States. If you eat lettuce in the United States, November to March, it's coming from this area. Right? So massive implications of significant supply reductions in this region as both long-term drought consequences materialize, as well as climate change impacts. The IPCC has reported that the hydrologic effects of climate change in the western United States will be, as they put it eloquently, negative and significant. This is from the summary for policymakers, right? Right at a 7th grade level. negative and significant consequences. These graphs just show a few of those impacts. Projected temperature increase, these are from the IPCC 4 assessment report. Information, of course, is being updated with the 5th assessment report. But under either the A2 and B1 scenarios, you can see that temperatures in our region, and there is fairly high consensus, so in the IPCC language, there's high confidence in these projections, that temperatures will increase between 3.5 to 8.5 degrees Fahrenheit in our region. We've already seen about a 4 degree Fahrenheit increase over the time period from the turn of the 20th century. We're also going to see significant declines in the snow water equivalent, and we've already seen materialize the disappearance of frost days and a dramatic increase in what are known as misery days, right, which are for us days over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's getting hotter. The results on precipitation are a little less certain, but it is probable, it is likely in the IPCC scenario that we will see reductions in precipitation leading to reductions in surface water runoff in this region. Now, these adverse effects on the freshwater systems will, of course, aggravate, and they're conditioned by and interact with the effects of a variety of other stressors, including rapid population growth and urbanization, economic development, and land use changes, most notably the conversion of agricultural land to urban and municipal environments within this region. This is Lake Mead, August 2014, most recent images I could find. The elevation of Lake Mead stands at 1,081 feet. This is a number that everyone in the Southwest knows. This is immediately understandable to the residents in our area. What you see here, that bleached out area, we call the bathtub ring. That's the bathtub ring around Lake Mead. Why is that number important? Why do we care about that reservoir number, that 1,081 feet? This shows the Lake Mead capacity, and it's not only the capacity that matters, it is the policies that are implemented at different lake level elevations. So the capacity and the full capacity is 25.9 million acre feet, or an elevation of 1,219 feet above sea level, and that's surplus for us. You move down and you see we now sit just above this critical elevation level of 1,075 feet above sea level, which triggers a shortage sharing agreement, right, that's been entered into by the 7 Western Basin states along with the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Reclamation. For the first time ever in the next water year in Arizona, we will see reductions in the supply of surface water from the Colorado River delivered to the state due to dropping into this shortage sharing agreement. So the policy will be triggered that cuts off water to Arizona. And Arizona is a junior water rights holder to the other states, meaning that Arizona loses almost its full allocation of 2.9 million acre feet of Colorado River water before California loses a drop. Right? So this has a massive political, economic, societal implication for our state in particular. Another elevation to look at, 1,000 feet, is the lower Southern Nevada Water Authority intake. That's Las Vegas's water supply. That's 95% of Las Vegas's water supply comes from this reservoir. 95% of their supply. If and when we hit that 1,000 foot level, Las Vegas no longer can pull water out of the reservoir. That's the bottom pipe. Okay? So you want to talk about how people are making decisions under the uncertainty of future climate change? You want to talk about people who deny that climate change is existing? Las Vegas is spending $900 million right now to build a lower intake, right? A deeper pipe to get below that 1,000 foot level. Okay? Tell me those people don't believe climate change impacts are materializing. They're spending $900,000 or $900 million to build that new canal. This is from the Bureau of Reclamation and their major study on Colorado River water supply and demand, and it uses the best available information from all of the participating states and agencies to look at the long-term running average for supply and demand in the basin, and then using an ensemble modeling approach with downscaled climate models to project out what that water supply will be into the future with uncertainty, as well as the projected demand. The take-home message of this, and the bullet that got picked up in every one of the newspapers, was that there could be up to a 3.2 million acre-foot structural deficit by mid-century in the basin. A couple things to point out that my colleagues in the water resource management community like to remind people is that this is under the assumption of no interventions. Right? So, as they point out, we're not going to get to a 3.5 million acre-foot deficit and do nothing about it. Okay? So this is projecting with no interventions. And another thing that's interesting to look at is the range of uncertainty for that supply. Right? High degree of uncertainty for the supply. There's not as much uncertainty about the demand. That's not because we know that much more. It's because the techniques for projecting demand are so much more poor. We have such poor techniques for actually projecting that demand. We really haven't characterized the uncertainty in any good way. My colleagues in the water resource community also point out that, for instance, they have seen almost a 20-year trend of reductions in urban demand in most urban cities in this region. But yet, the projections in the report just go up and away into the future. So that's an area of real need for future research, is improving water demand forecasting. So I return to my question, given these uncertainties, how can we develop these transformational solutions? Well, this schematic shows the organization for our research enterprise, and I won't go through the whole thing, but I just want to kind of focus on a couple areas. One is that we're trying to integrate regional land use and climate change, right? So physical climate science with policy sciences, focus on actors, governance, institution, economic decision-making, and using simulation modeling, scenarios, and visual analytics as a way to integrate knowledge and create knowledge exchange networks, and then creating a series of evidence-based sustainability transitions and testing those through both modeling and simulation, as well as testing those through pilot projects on the ground with partner agencies. And the question that we ask in this specific study that I'm reporting on today is, how do we integrate stakeholder engagement, scenario analysis, and simulation modeling to inform these transitions? And I want to also recognize at this point and give credit to a couple of my colleagues, Arnhem Week, a professor from the School of Sustainability, and Lauren Withicum-Keeler, who is a PhD student. Much of the work you're going to see on this next series of slides was conducted as part of Lauren's dissertation project with Arnhem as her advisor, and then David Sampson, who is a simulation modeling expert at DCDC, as well as Ray Quay, who participated in these studies. A couple just kind of key points for this study. We know that, or at least I argue, that the transformational solutions are needed, and these transitions require participatory methods, but also future-oriented thinking. We have to develop new tools and techniques to think into the future, especially in a future that is going to be non-analogous to our past. The past is becoming increasingly less useful as a predictor for the future in a non-stationary climate. So we need an approach, we argue, that marries these anticipatory and predictive capacities of dynamic simulation models with scenario planning methodology that's designed for future thinking and designed to support these transitions. So the goal of this particular study was to create a set of scenarios that were normative, that were based on stakeholder preferences, on the values of stakeholders, that link different types of knowledge to focus the conversation, to focus the discourse among academics, policymakers, and other interested stakeholders. This is our conceptual approach to this particular study, where we're looking at a systems framework for analyzing water governance regimes, which was developed by DCDC researchers Arnhem Week and Kelly Larson, which starts with delineating the physical boundaries of your system, classic approach, right, in physical geography. Where is the physical system? But also, what's the social institutional system, and what are the activities? This approach asks the very simple question: who does what with water and why? Right? Within your region, who are the actors? What are they doing with water? Well, they're supplying it, delivering it, using it, dealing with outflows, and across those activities, they're governing. And then we look at the structure of the causes and effects within that system which are driven primarily in our analysis by the actors' intentions, their rules, right? And then the interfaces with the natural, built, and social environments. So this provides us with our analytical or conceptual framework. This shows the structure of the multi-year research study that we conducted as part of this project. If you look up in phase 1, it was a current state analysis by first analyzing the water governance regime. Who is doing what with water in central Arizona? And then doing a sustainability appraisal based on a series of sustainability principles. What are the current problems in that system? We then moved on to phase 2 to elicit decision maker and other stakeholder preferences for the future of the system, develop a series of plausible scenarios for the system, and then model those scenarios using a water balance model. The final stage, which is to be completed over the coming years, is to develop a series of strategies to implement the transition and to re-engage the stakeholders to determine the utility of the scenarios and conduct deliberative processes to see if the scenarios resonate with them, if they find them useful in their policy discourse. This shows you how the project was conducted. We conducted a current state of analysis, and we also analyzed through a discourse analysis approach all of the policy documents. So we looked through the plans. If we want to know what the future of the water system is going to look like, one good place to start is all the people's plans who say what they're going to do in the future. Right? So the Department of Water Resources Management plans, policy proposals from nonprofit organizations, etc. We use these to develop a survey with questionnaire items that stakeholders evaluated in terms of their preference. How preferable is this future condition for the water system? We took these preferences and we translated those into model variables and parameters for the models. So the idea is to essentially ask the question, what if these values play out across the water system? Can we analyze some of the consequences of those value systems? We conducted a variety of scenario construction processes to make sure that the scenarios were internally consistent. So each scenario, there was no principle within a scenario that violated the other principles within the scenario, and that they were sufficiently diverse so that one scenario was distinct or different from another. We ended up with a suite of scenarios that are based on the stakeholder preferences, based on the plausible future, based on compliance with a series of sustainability principles, and one based on a local water security discourse that was identified through the planning documents. And our signature scenario suite includes these 4 scenarios. Technical management for megapolitan development, which was based on the stakeholder preferences. Citizen councils pursue comprehensive water sustainability, which was based on compliance with sustainability principles. Experts manage limited water for unlimited growth, which was more or less the most plausible kind of current future system, the business as usual. And then the collaborative governance makes local water security a priority, which emerged sort of inductively from the analysis of the documents we conducted. We then create ways to try to communicate these. How do you communicate the results of a scenario? Well, we use things like visualizations in the form of newspaper stories. So this tells the story of this scenario. It's the technical management scenario. The governance is removed from the public domain. Residents have varying degrees of knowledge and investment about their water, where it comes from, but it's technical experts who work together to acquire new sources of water and ensure existing supplies continue to reach their constituents, etc. So this helps us to kind of communicate the results of those scenarios. We make one of these for each of the scenarios. And then what we did is we collaborated with our partners in the ASU Decision Theater Network. So this is the Decision Theater, which is a collaborative, immersive visualization environment that we have at ASU, which allows us to put the results of the modeling simulation up on a series of screens and conduct deliberative processes and do this in a real-time and interactive way. So we can run the models right in front of the stakeholders, ask them to make changes, rerun the models in real time. And we used WaterSim, which is our signature socio-hydrology model that integrates information about water supply, demand, and the rules, most importantly, that govern the system in terms of institutional rules, laws, and policy. And we evaluate these scenarios with the stakeholders. I have these in here for the technical modeling audience, and I'll just very quickly cover. These show the model dynamics for WaterSim. At its core, if you're not that interested, basically it's a water supply demand balance model. Okay? It's running on an annual basis, but it also has data sources that are running on faster time steps, monthly or daily data sources. It's not a physically based model. Okay? It models the water policy system. Right? So it keeps track of a series of credits that each of the water providers have based on an allocation from the state regulator. This shows how we're modeling the water supply network, and it includes information on our major surface water supplies, the Colorado River and the Salton Verde River system, as well as groundwater. And importantly, it models where the policy and law triggers affect the flow of the physical water system through our urban environment. And just to give you an idea of how complex the urban environment is, this is the city model. So we follow the water through this water use network within each of 33 different water providers within the Phoenix metropolitan area. So we can produce results at an aggregate level for the region or for at one of each of 33 different water providers. This just actually visually shows the complexity of modeling water within an urban system. And this is why hardly anybody does it, right? And this is why it's difficult when people say, can you make WaterSim for Las Vegas? And can you make WaterSim for Denver? And will you make WaterSim for Tel Aviv? And all of these other places? Well, this is where the nuts and bolts of getting the water modeling right in an urban environment lies. And this is different everywhere, right? Now, what we feel we've built is an architecture where we've got almost everything in the model so that you can potentially choose what to include and what to exclude. But we're getting there. In the new proposal, we're going to do WaterSim Las Vegas and Denver, to Pat's chagrin. She's like, are we really going to do it? We are. This is what the interface looks like. So this is the ugly, under the hood part of the model. But if you want to enhance the credibility among model users, they need to be able to evaluate this. Where are the data coming from? What are the routes for the modeling? This is what we're trying to make for an interface. Right? So this is showing a series of sustainability indicators at the top, which show you the results of the model, a series of policy choices which the user can manipulate, and then a series of tabs of outputs of the modeling analysis. So the goal for the interface is to be appealing, visually appealing, to be easy to utilize, and to be scalable so that different people at different levels of expertise can use it. Here are the different scenarios, and they're translated into modeling variables. So for the technical, just focus on this one, the technical management. We pursue new supply, we build new infrastructure, we don't control urban growth, we take municipal effluent and recycle it and use it for drinking water supplies through direct potable reuse, and we use top-down management with minimal consultation with the public. Right? What we're trying to do is then expand those characteristics of that governance approach and look at, well, what does it mean for the model? In the model, we pursue new supply, we don't allocate water towards riparian area protection, and we don't worry about groundwater overdraft. That's the strong supply side of the model. So we translate the preferences of and values of the stakeholders through the model into variables for each of those scenarios, and then we run them through these kinds of active, mediating, and passive conditions, but at the end of the day, all we're doing is basically either increasing supply or increasing demand, right? As a balance model. Everything ends up translating into one of those two functions. And what we can do then is to compare the results of the different scenarios. This is our baseline simulation. This is essentially the current condition. And just to read these graphs, if you look at the vertical axis, you'll see the climate effect on runoff. So the white line shows our historical flow. That's the baseline or the comparison condition. And then you look out over time, over simulation year, running out from current time out through the year 2080. And this shows you over an ensemble analysis of different climate change impacts, ranging from current conditions to reductions of up to 40 to 50% in surface water supplies. How do we perform in terms of aquifer balance and percent of demand met by groundwater? So in these heat maps, these hotter areas down here show you that you have, in this case, up to 50 or 60% of your demand being met by groundwater, which is patently unsustainable in our system. So what we do is then look at all 4 of the scenarios, modeled on the same evaluation output. And we can hopefully quickly see and compare the results of these different scenarios and see that certain scenarios, well, here's the one thing, everything is fine under good conditions, right? High river flows, meet current conditions, everything's okay, right? This is the pray for rain strategy, right? But under the more severe climate impact strategies, certain of these scenarios perform better, particularly the technical management and the water security scenarios. Why do they perform better? Well, classic water resource management, we're going out there getting new water, right? Importation. What this doesn't consider in this particular analysis is how much that would cost, right? But that's what we're doing, and that's why those scenarios are performing well under these conditions. We can look at these on other metrics like change in groundwater aquifer from the baseline. Results are similar in that certain scenarios perform well, particularly the scenarios where you add new water to the system. But this is what we're really interested in developing a suite of metrics to evaluate these scenarios across broader criteria like resilience, vulnerability, adaptability, and social justice. We do not have the ability to quantitatively model these other evaluative criteria at this point, right? This is a real need within the research community, is to figure out how to model scenarios across different outputs like social justice. If we're going to think seriously about sustainability, we need to think about all of the dimensions of sustainability, not just water supply, right? So right now we're using sort of a qualitative, does it enhance or detract from these? But we're working to figure out ways to create quantitative indicators for these scenarios. And in closing, I just want to say that this is where we're headed. We're trying to figure out, a good old-fashioned model sensitivity analysis. For the modelers out there, we actually really don't know which variables are driving the results for the outcomes. We know basically that it's new supply, right, that's making certain scenarios more effective against those criteria, but which specific variables in the model are driving those results. So we're working on a classic sensitivity analysis now. How robust are these scenarios? How do they perform when we ask people to weight priorities? I care more about social justice than I do about water supply. Can anybody interpret these visualizations, and can we develop more meaningful, salient, powerful visualizations? Taking these scenarios back into the decision theater and doing more deliberative and participatory conversations with the stakeholders to find out whether they think that these are resonating or consistent with their values or not. And if they don't, does it change their perceptions? If we show you that if we adopt your particular perspective on the future of the water system, and here are some of the negative consequences, how does that affect your thinking about your own values, right? So we're working with psychologists, social psychologists, to understand those kinds of issues. And so in closing, I just want to thank again Howard, Pat, and everyone for inviting me here, and also to credit the National Science Foundation for their support, and thank also my co-authors. So I'd be happy to take any questions now.
Great, Dave. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have an extent. I was just going to ask whether there's a mic, and Graham has got the mic. So who's got the first question? Yeah.
I was told Howard also always asks the first question.
Only when I'm in the audience.
So a lot of folks in the West say water rolls uphill towards money. And I was curious how you expect to, or if you can even possibly incorporate money and how people make decisions regarding the cost of things. Mm-hmm. Because I have a lot of ideas about what should happen, but if you actually attach a price tag to it, I would change those ideas. So
yeah, it's a really, really good question, and that is an old saying in the West. Water flows uphill towards money. It tends to be true, but there are a lot of caveats and nuances to that. And so we don't have a robust economic demand or an economic component module to the modeling. Right now, basically, what we're doing is we're taking the results and we're looking at some of these model variables and parameters. And for instance, with the technical management, we say, okay, we can model the addition of new supply. How would that new supply be developed? Well, in our case, there's really a few possibilities. There's interbasin transfers, right? So bringing new water in from other basins, which is a very low probability, very low likelihood. There's no new water out there for the Southwest to go get. The other big possibility, which is very much in the public discourse, is desalination, right? So coastal desal, either on the California coast or on the Mexican coast, not piped back to Arizona, but paid for by Arizona and then traded for Colorado River water with either the nation of Mexico or the state of California. That's very much in the public discourse right now. We know cost estimates for desalination plants, right? So what we can do is just facilitate a conversation to get to this particular future of the water system, this technical management future, where we need new supply augmentation to make this future a reality. That's going to involve coastal desal in California or Mexico. What are the cost estimates for that? What are the technical feasibilities for that? Let's have a deliberative process with the policymakers to go through those discussions. So some of the things like the costs of some of these solutions, as well as the impacts on things like social justice and intergenerational equity, et cetera, we don't currently have the capacity to model, but that doesn't mean we can't and shouldn't be thinking about them. We just need to use other conceptual approaches or other deliberative approaches to incorporate those into the process.
Yeah, Toddy. Mike.
Thank you very much, Dave. It was a really great presentation. Often there's a trade-off between comprehensiveness and timeliness in terms of how we think about what needs to go into content for a decision and what policymakers need.
Right.
So how do you think about those trade-offs given some of the things that you're working on here in terms of meeting some of that transdisciplinary need that you may be trying to?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there is a balance between, this goes back in my mind to those criteria that we use, the salience, credibility, and legitimacy criteria, right? To enhance the credibility of the modeling effort with water resource managers in particular, took a Herculean effort over time, led initially by Pat and modelers like Tim Lant and David Sampson and others, to be able to be constantly engaging with these water resource managers to get it right in terms of modeling the water system. And that took, honestly, 5 to 7 years before we had any buy-in from the water resource community that we had even come close to representing the complexity of the system. Right? So that's part of the long game. Right? We're in it for the long term, and we're trying to get the system representation correct or as accurate as we can with the feedback and insight from that knowledge community. But there are also but that can potentially reduce the salience of the effort, right? Or reduce the relevance of the effort for current or short-term decision-making priorities. Right? So there's a real balance or trade-off in some of these criteria. The legitimacy also, in our earlier versions of the model, we were not capturing the implications of major water rights settlements agreements with the Native American communities, right? And that really reduced the legitimacy of the modeling effort according to a variety of different stakeholders. We still have a hard time getting buy-in from the environmental nonprofit organizations because we don't currently model very effectively water for the environment. Right? So these are all trade-offs that we have to kind of balance, and I think one of the important considerations is going into an effort like this is to try to understand first and foremost who are the engaged stakeholders, right? Identifying those stakeholders and identifying, we often talk about informing decision making, right? But people very rarely say, what decisions? What specifically are you trying to inform, right? Is it a 10-year water resource management plan, or is it a daily riverine operations plan for the reservoirs? Right? Which things are you actually trying to inform? If you have a good handle on who are the stakeholders that you're trying to engage, what specific decisions or policy processes you're trying to inform, then I think you craft an effort that's targeted at those things, and you'll be much more effective. For dealing with the nonprofit organizations, right now we're using much more conceptual, what we call sort of sketch planning approaches to dealing with how do we figure out what the environmental demand for water really is in urban ecosystem rivers? Right? We don't really know. And I've talked to enough urban ecologists. We have one of the best urban ecology programs in the world at ASU, and they don't know, right? What's the demand for the ecosystem in this urban river, right? Because and they've even recognized this. I love the ecologists I work with, because it really depends on what you're trying to get out of that river, right? What is it that you want out of that river? That determines how much water you need to flow down the river. So we're using a variety of other kind of faster sketch planning approaches for incorporating some of those things into our effort. We've also learned, right, that you can't build a model of the world. And we're now connecting our model with other models, like to look at the interacting effects of water systems and energy systems, water systems and agricultural systems. So coupling models, especially with existing tools that are already in use by the agencies or partners, is a really good strategy too.
Dave, I've got a couple of questions. Could you just comment on the kind of scale dependence of the problem? So you're focusing on Phoenix and
Right.
the urban demand, but that's then set in the whole of the Colorado River Basin,
Right.
which actually has a physical dimension, but also a broader economic and social dimension, because
Right.
it's exporting water. So how could you maybe just discuss the different perspectives that arise at different scales, and how you handle that as a decision problem?
Right. And that's a really, really interesting and exciting sort of part of the challenge, because it gets us as scientists thinking about, basically nested scales. That's really what we're talking about, is kind of, a system within a system within a system, right? And trying to understand what are at least the most critical cross-scale dynamics, right? And how can we consider those? So from the broadest scale, from the Colorado River Basin scale, what are the critical constraints and drivers that are affecting Arizona as a state, and then central Arizona as a region? And trying our best to incorporate, in the example with the water sim modeling, it's the shortage sharing agreement for the institutional arrangement between the states is the most critical sort of policy constraint on what happens. If we don't have the shortage sharing agreement included in the modeling, we get the results completely wrong, right? Because we've shown, actually, the paper that Pat led in the British Geological Society Special Publication Series, one of the really interesting insights in that paper is that it is actually the interaction term. It's the interaction between the physical system, the drought, the climate impacts, and the effects on water supply, the interaction of that term with the policy decision making that causes the difference in the outcomes. So if you don't have that policy system from that scale incorporated into your analysis, you're patently just wrong in your answer, right? So figuring out what are those critical cross-scale dynamics and incorporating at least those into your modeling is really important.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Graham, the man with the mic.
Thanks, Dave. In the Saskatchewan River Basin, one of the big trade-offs is between agriculture and energy production, and it's kind of mostly agricultural production in the upper part of the basin in Alberta, and then hydropower production in the lower part of the basin in Manitoba. Has there been issues in terms of, hydropower producers wanting to buy water from agricultural producers in the Phoenix area or in Arizona in general?
Well, not exactly that trade-off, but yes, trade-offs. And in fact, we've been pushing this idea really hard, right? That thinking about water sustainability as we move forward is a game of trade-offs. And it really is. The question is no longer, and can no longer be, do we have enough water, right? That is such a dead-end question, right? The question is, water for what, right? Water for what priorities, right? And it really, as a social scientist, it brings us home, right, to the normative, value-oriented dimensions of policy and decision-making, right? Is it water for agriculture, water for the environment, water for municipal users, right? Water for energy production? Water for what? Because the short answer is no, we don't have enough water, and we all know that. We don't have enough water for everything, for all they want. And we lived under that life for 100 years, right? And we know we're no longer there anymore. So the idea of trade-offs, in our particular instance, it's trade-offs between agricultural use and municipal and industrial use. That's our big trade-off right now. 70%, 60 to 70% of our water statewide goes to irrigated agriculture, okay? And that has been, the major discussion about the trade-offs over time. The implicit assumption among the water supply community, water resource management community in Arizona has been that agricultural water use has been serving essentially as a buffer, right? It's our, as one water resource manager said to me one time, we leave the hose running in the yard so we can turn it off when we need to, right? And basically, under most of the 21st century, we had technically a major surplus of water, right? And so we utilize that surplus for agriculture. As that surplus begins to be strained, now that's a surplus only in a very unusual interpretation of the word, right? Largely because if we do not use that water, we risk losing it, right? So under a use it or lose it philosophy, we had a surplus because there's no incentive whatsoever in the policy system to leave it in the river or leave it in the reservoirs. That's changing. That's a transformational policy solution. The Bureau of Reclamation right now is undergoing a major pilot test. They've allocated tens of millions of dollars to multiple municipalities in the western states to undertake some tests to conserve water in the cities and bank that water in the reservoirs with the promise that it'll be there when they need it again. Okay? We've never been able to do that, right? So that is turning the water compact in the 7 western states on its head, right? That's when when I'm writing a proposal to NSF and I'm saying we're ready for transformational change and people are saying, don't spook the system, don't be too aggressive. And I say, look at what the Bureau of Reclamation is doing. This is the most conservative organization that we have in terms of water resources. They are creating transformational change within the way that they do business, right? Clearly, the system is ready for it. But so yes, trade-offs are the name of the game in the future. That's what politics is for, though, right? I'm one of those people that politics is a good thing, right? Politics is about trade-offs, facilitating questions about who pays and who benefits, right? Politics can be a really effective tool in this situation because that's what it does, is facilitate conversations about trade-offs.
I guess I should stand. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. And I was just wondering, I guess this is a big snapshot and there's a lot going on with the simulation modeling there. But being an urban water sustainability focus and land use, I'm wondering if your modeling considered things like actually looking at urban growth, like mapping and looking at how much of the metropolitan has changed and also impact to the dependency or the capacity of water treatment. So maybe growth of WWTPs, so wastewater treatment facilities, and matching that to the actually how much capacity the system needs to deal with the effluent. Because you did mention that you do look at effluent for the purpose of increasing supply. So I'm just wondering.
So both good questions. On the first part, yes, we do actually incorporate what I think are still some fairly simplistic models of urbanization within our model. So we do model urbanization as part of our population projections, right? So we look at spatially differentiated population projections around the region. We rely on data from partners like our regional government authority. We use that data. It's what we call institutionally accepted data. It's sort of, if you're going to do population projections in our region and you're not using this particular data set, it's hard to be part of the conversation because all of the regional planning authority and city authorities are using this data. But we know it's flawed, right? Because it's too rosy, right? And it doesn't really, it's not dynamic, right? It tends to be kind of projecting growth. It's boosterish, right? It's projecting growth into the future based on goals of tax increases, But what we're working on is some more robust, more sophisticated ways to do urban growth projections within our region. And then, yes, tying that to infrastructure, right? So we do model all of the urban water and wastewater treatment facilities in the model, right? So we can redirect the effluent in the modeling environment to any use we want. Right? We can redirect it to urban groundwater recharge, which some of the scenarios, that's where the model water is going. Right? We can redirect it towards agriculture. We can redirect it towards direct potable reuse or indirect potable reuse. So we have the ability to change all of those parameters for the wastewater. But we don't model, for instance, the future infrastructure needs based on It's similar to the other question about economics. That becomes kind of a policy discussion about, well, if we are going to get here, what would that take in terms of new wastewater treatment plants, new water treatment plants, et cetera? Yeah, it's a good question, though.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock, and I'm aware of people listening online.
Hi, Mom.
So I think we need to close down. It's been a really illuminating talk, Dave.
Yeah.
We've very much appreciated you coming and
Thank
sharing your experience from Arizona. I think there are a lot of resonances with the program here, and Dave is actually going to spend a little while in Louis' bar shortly, so if you're interested in following up, there's an opportunity to catch him there. But I'd just like to close with many thanks
Thank
for
you.
a great talk. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks.